I'm about to show you one of the most brutal executions in history. On November 24th, 1326, a man was dragged in front of a massive crowd in Hereford. The plan was to hang, draw, and quarter him, which is already an insane punishment for treason. But for this guy, a man so hated that a modern poll literally named him the worst Briton of the 14th century, the normal punishment wasn't even close to enough. His execution was going to be a masterclass in cruelty, a totally public spectacle of destruction, and the queen he betrayed was watching the whole thing. This is the story of Hugh Despenser the Younger, the man who won over a king and, in the process, bankrupted an entire kingdom. It's an insane story of how ambition and obsession can lead to an end so gruesome it becomes a legend. To understand how one guy could make so many people hate him, we have to look at the chaotic world he came from, and the weak king who let him get away with it all. England in the early 14th century was a total mess. King Edward II, who took the throne in 1307, was the complete opposite of his father, the legendary warrior king, Edward I. His dad was a beast, but Edward II was more interested in hobbies like rowing and farming than actually running a country. He inherited a kingdom with insane war debt and a losing war against Scotland. From day one, Edward II had a huge problem. He loved to pick handsome, ambitious guys and give them insane amounts of power and money, cutting out all the powerful nobles. The barons were furious, feeling like they were being totally robbed of their influence. The first of these favorites was a guy named Piers Gaveston. The king's bond with Gaveston was so over the top that people at the time called it an indissoluble love, and for centuries people have debated if they were lovers. Whatever it was, the king's obsession made everyone mad, especially his own wife, Queen Isabella. It got so bad that a crew of barons, led by the king's own cousin, had Gaveston captured and executed in 1312. But killing Gaveston didn't fix anything. It just created a job opening for a new favorite. England kept failing. A crushing defeat at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314 made Scotland independent and completely wrecked England's reputation. Then came the Great Famine, a miserable time with no food and tons of disease. The barons tried to take control with new rules, but Edward didn't learn a single thing. He was lonely and wanted a new best friend. And walking right into this powder keg was a man way more clever and dangerous than Gaveston ever was, Hugh Despenser the Younger. Hugh Despenser the Younger was already a big deal. Born around 1287, his dad was a respected nobleman. Even crazier, in 1306, Hugh married the king's own niece, Eleanor de Clare. This turned out to be a genius move. When Eleanor's brother died at Bannockburn, she inherited a massive fortune, making Despenser one of the richest men in England overnight. For about 10 years, Despenser was just another guy at court. He even sided with the barons against the first favorite, Gaveston. But after Gaveston died, and Despenser got his huge inheritance, he saw his opening. In 1318, he was made Royal Chamberlain, a job that gave him 100% direct access to the king, no filter. He immediately squeezed out all his competition and made himself Edward's #1. Soon, he wasn't just an advisor, he was basically running the entire country. The relationship between Edward and Hugh became the biggest deal in English politics. Were they lovers? Nobody wrote it down for sure, but their connection was incredibly intense, just like with Gaveston. Edward let Despenser and his father do literally whatever they wanted, which made the other nobles rage. They saw Despenser as an arrogant fraud who was hoarding all the royal power. Queen Isabella was especially furious. She had tolerated Gaveston, but the Despensers completely overshadowed her. The court became a total snake pit, and it was all focused on Despenser. His power was insane. As Chamberlain, he was the ultimate gatekeeper. Every single request or meeting with the king had to go through him first, and he used that power to make himself richer and to crush anyone who got in his way. With the king's love as his ultimate shield, Despenser's ambition became toxic. He got a reputation for his insane greed and cruelty, especially to the lords on the Welsh border. One of these lords, Roger Mortimer, would grow to hate him on a deep personal level. Despenser was on top of the world, but he was building an army of enemies who were just waiting for their chance to take him down. With total power, Hugh Despenser's greed went into overdrive. He and his dad started a campaign of extortion and land grabbing that was shocking even for the time. Despenser used the law like a personal weapon. He literally cheated his own sister-in-law out of her inheritance and bullied other noblewomen into giving him their land, because he knew the king would always have his back. His cruelty wasn't just financial. He was accused of having a Welsh hostage, Llywelyn Bren, brutally executed without the king's permission, even after the man had been promised mercy. This gave him a nasty reputation in the Welsh marches. The final straw was a land dispute. When another lord legally got a piece of land Despenser wanted, Despenser just had the king take it and give it to him instead. That was it. In 1321, a team of angry marcher lords, led by Roger Mortimer, declared war. In the Despenser War, they went on a rampage across the country, targeting and destroying the massive Despenser properties. They demanded the king banish both Hugh and his father. Under insane pressure, Edward finally agreed, and the Despensers were exiled. During his short time away, Hugh the Younger allegedly became a pirate in the English Channel, adding to his lawless reputation. But the exile didn't last. Edward, who couldn't function without his favorite, staged a brilliant and ruthless comeback. He used a mistake by the barons to rally support, and by early 1322, the Despensers were back. The king completely crushed the rebellion at the Battle of Boroughbridge, executing his own cousin and throwing Roger Mortimer in the Tower of London. With their enemies gone, the Despensers were more powerful than ever. For the next 4 years, from 1322 to 1326, England was their personal playground. They ruled like tyrants, ignoring Parliament and doing whatever they wanted. Their corruption had no limits, and they showed zero mercy to their enemies. But they made one fatal mistake. They alienated Queen Isabella. Humiliated and powerless, she was sent to France for a diplomatic mission in 1325. This was a catastrophic error, because in Paris, she found a new ally. Roger Mortimer had pulled off a daring escape from the Tower of London and had also fled to France. Together, the betrayed queen and the exiled lord started plotting their ultimate revenge. In France, Queen Isabella had a complete transformation. She was no longer an ignored wife. She became a political powerhouse. She publicly announced she would not return to England until Hugh Despenser was gone, a demand she knew the king would never meet. She played the part of the wronged woman perfectly, dressing in all black like a widow to show she was done with her king. More importantly, she and Roger Mortimer became lovers, their shared hatred for the Despensers turning them into a legendary team. They started building an army, using their son's dowry to hire mercenaries. In September 1326, they sailed for England. Their invasion force was tiny, maybe 1,500 guys, but they were landing in a kingdom that was about to explode. Years of Despenser's tyranny meant the government had almost zero friends left. As Isabella and Mortimer marched across the country, the king's support completely vanished. Nobles who had suffered under the Despensers flocked to her side. The city of London itself revolted. King Edward and Hugh Despenser were caught completely by surprise. They had no idea how much everyone hated them. They fled London with a ton of cash, running for Wales, where Despenser had his power base. But it was useless. Their own followers deserted them. Their escape became a desperate chase. On October 26th, the Queen's army took Bristol. The very next day, Hugh Despenser the Elder was captured, condemned, and executed on the spot. He was hanged in his own armor, then beheaded and chopped into pieces for dogs to eat. The king and Hugh the Younger were finally caught in mid-November. The game was over. King Edward was locked up in Kenilworth Castle, his reign finished. But for Hugh Despenser, something so much worse was waiting. He was the man everyone blamed for years of misery, the target of all that rage. His end would not be fast. It would be a performance. Knowing the horror that was coming, Despenser tried to starve himself to death, but they forced him to eat. They were going to keep him alive to face the theatrical rage of his enemies. On November 24th, 1326, Hugh Despenser the Younger was brought to the market in Hereford. Watching over the event were his biggest enemies, Roger Mortimer and Queen Isabella herself, who reportedly had dinner while she watched the show. A trial was held, but the verdict was decided long before he even got there. Despenser wasn't even allowed to speak, as a huge list of his crimes was read out: treason, theft, robbing churches, and turning the king against the queen. The sentence was hanging, drawing, and quartering, but with some very personal touches. First, according to some stories, they stripped him completely naked and put a coat on him with his family's crest drawn upside down, a sign that his noble status was being erased forever. He was then tied to a ladder and dragged through the screaming crowds to the gallows. There, the real horror began. He was hanged from a gallows 50 feet high, but they cut him down while he was still conscious, choking and gasping for air. The most graphic and insane details come from a writer named Jean Froissart. Now, Froissart wrote this years later and was known for hyping up his stories, but his account shows the pure hatred people felt. He wrote that with Despenser forced to watch, an executioner cut off his genitals and threw them into a fire, a punishment for the rumors of sodomy with the king. Then, his stomach was sliced open, and his entrails were pulled out and burned right in front of his eyes. Finally, his heart was cut out and thrown into the flames, the ultimate punishment for a traitor. As the crowd roared, what was left of his body was taken down and beheaded, but it still wasn't over. His head was sent to be stuck on a spike on London Bridge. His body was cut into 4 pieces, and each piece was sent to a corner of the kingdom: York, Bristol, Dover, and Carlisle, as a terrifying warning to anyone who would ever try to do what he did. It was the complete and total annihilation of a man, designed to literally cleanse the kingdom of his memory. The story of Hugh Despenser is an insane reminder of how personal relationships can change history and how absolute power can make you do crazy things. The brutal politics of the 14th century might seem like another world, but the themes of ambition, betrayal, and revenge are timeless. If you thought this dive into history was insane, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories from the most dramatic moments in the past. And I want to know what you think. Do you think Despenser deserved his fate? Or was his execution a step too far, even for back then? Let me know in the comments. Hugh Despenser's horrific end was a massive turning point. It led directly to King Edward II being deposed and forced to give the throne to his son, Edward III. For a few years, Queen Isabella and Roger Mortimer ran England, but their own regime was unstable, and in 1330, the young King Edward III seized power for himself and had Mortimer executed. Years later, Edward III would allow the last remains of Hugh Despenser, a head, a thigh bone, and a few vertebrae, to be gathered and given a proper burial. Despenser's story is a chilling lesson in tyranny. He was a guy who won a king's trust and used it to feed his darkest impulses, destroying not only himself, but the king he was supposed to serve. His death, designed as the ultimate spectacle of shame, made sure that while his power was gone, his name would be remembered forever, not as a leader, but as a monster.